achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and while I am still recording this at the very tail end of the year 2014, we are talking about the very first event of the 2015 MMA season, at least for the UFC, and we're looking at UFC 182, which will take place on January 3rd from the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, and it will feature a much-anticipated UFC light heavyweight title belt as the champion Jon Jones puts the title on the line against the highly touted Daniel Cormier. I've got your 5 main card predictions for you on this episode of the show. All 6 preliminary breakdowns will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, along with the bet packs, which are absolutely kicking ass right now. I've had 3 straight shows of producing over $1,000 in winnings. 2 of them have topped over $1,400. My prop bets have been bang on. I'm coming off a very strong show. I went 10-2 overall. The last card. Just generally speaking, I'm hitting my stride again. I've made some adjustments as far as my parlays, and I'm going a little more conservative, but making some smart moves. And I found some trends. I've got another trend that seems to be clicking. It's actually one of the reasons I picked a fighter in this fight. I won't talk about it unless you look at my bet pack. I took a fighter on this card. But nonetheless, I'm going to do some research and get some hard numbers on that in the not-too-distant future. Either way, we have lots of fights to get to. This should be a very exciting and much-anticipated card, so let's get to that first matchup. The opening prediction of the night comes to us in the UFC's welterweight division as the number 6th-ranked Hector Showweather Lombard, 34-4-1, 1-no contest, takes on 27-10-0, the People's Warrior, and the returning Josh Burkman. Now, I said Burkman is returning for the first time to the UFC since 2008. He's fought 11 times since his last appearance, going 9-2 with losses against Jordan Meehan and Steve Carl for the WSOF welterweight title. He went 5-for-5 in his loss. 5-for-5 in his UFC run, but he lost the last 3 fights, which is a little bit concerning. And Mike Swick is the only guy still on the UFC roster, as far as I know, that he actually fought during his first run. Which we know how effective or at least active Mike Swick has been of late. Lombard almost 10 months off since his last appearance. This is his 3rd fight at welterweight, and he is coming off a 3-round decision, which showed his cardio can hold up for 3 rounds, even though it wasn't the greatest performance, especially in the second half. He did comment that he's not happy overall fighting an unranked opponent, as it doesn't progress his career or progress his title aspirations in the way he'd like it to. If he does win. Physically, Burkman 1 inch taller, same reach advantage, but Lombard's a very physically strong man. The question is he mastering that cut to welterweight? This is his 3rd appearance, so he should be as good as he's going to be, or at least better than the first 2 as far as cutting down. He knows what to expect, knows what his body's capable of. Burkman so far in his career, 7 wins by knockout. He's never been stopped. Coming off a knockout win over Tyler Stinson, he also stopped Aaron Simpson in his WSOF run. Likes to throw some nice low kicks, especially the inside. Was sitting back and trying to counter Steve Carl when he fought Carl. Not exactly the greatest ploy against Lombard, who, if he can start unloading, that can be a serious concern. He needs to use his speed and footwork in this matchup, work from the outside, stick and move, make Lombard chase him. For Hector Lombard, 19 wins by knockout. He's never been stopped by knockout or submission. Destroyed Juzimar Palhares. Also took out Nate Marquardt as well with big shots here in the UFC. 2.25 strikes landed per minute versus 2.24 strikes absorbed, so you rely significantly on the impact of his strikes to make the difference. He throws a lot of singles, and he has longer periods of activity, which we saw him cost him against Tim Boetsch, where he failed to pull the trigger. He likes to explode and attack in flurries and work from close range, but if he can't get in a position to do that, it really limits what he's able to do with his striking. He's a BJJ and Judo black belt, so he shows how good he is when he gets in tight. 7-0 in fights ended by submission, but his last submission win coming back in 2011 via heel hook over Jesse Taylor, so it's been a little bit since we've seen him submit someone. He's physically very strong, can overwhelm opponents with heavy ground and pound when he gets on top. 5 takedowns overall in his fight versus Shields on 5 attempts, which is pretty darn impressive. Even more impressive, he stopped all 7 of Shields' attempts to take the fight to the mat. He showed a hard sprawl, physically able to just defend guys because of his raw strength. Was taken down by bigger men at middleweight. For Burkman, 10 wins by submission. We saw him put John Fish to sleep with a guillotine. He likes to sprawl in the shot, get those hips back, and attack the neck when it pops out. But Steve Carl was able to take him down a couple of times and mounted him. And while Burkman did have some success against Carl, he was out positioned. And the big number that stands out to me there is he has been submitted 6 times, so it seems to be an Achilles heel. I think he'll have trouble taking Hector Lombard down or finding any grappling success whatsoever in this matchup. Burkman seemed to be slowing down in the Carl fight as well, so it makes me wonder, is he going to be able to push Lombard to exhaustion, and in the later rounds, will he be able to capitalize? I think Lombard was scoring TDs against Jake Shields, but not doing much from the top position. He was criticized for not trying to finish the fight after he couldn't get it done early on. I don't think Burkman will be able to do enough early on to get control of this matchup. He has been the underdog in several fights and had found success in winning those matchups, but I think Lombard is too much of a challenge for him. So my prediction is Hector Lombard to defeat Josh Burkman. I'm going to take Lombard by knockout. We're now in the UFC's flyweight divisions. The number 11th ranked Kyoji Horiguchi, 14-1-0, battles Louis Goodnight Gaudinot with a record of 7 wins and 3 losses. Now, that's a massive fight for Horiguchi. It could lead to a future title shot with a victory, or at least a title eliminator down the road, as he has certainly looked impressive so far in the UFC's very thin flyweight division. For Gaudinot, he failed to build on some pretty significant momentum he picked up early in his, I think it was his first flyweight matchup, actually, when he submitted John Lineker in a very exciting back-and-forth matchup. Since that fight in early 2012, he's fought twice, losing to Timothy Elliott and a no contest that originally was a submission victory against Phil Harris. For Horiguchi, he's fought 8 times in that span, including 3 times in the UFC, all of those fights with ending in victory for the Japanese fighter. Experience and activity both favor Horiguchi. 15 fights to 10, as we just talked about the activity, but 15 overall fights to 10 for Horiguchi. He has 9 wins by knockout, which is pretty darn impressive. He trains with Kid Yamamoto. He's kind of a Kid Yamamoto protege, if you will. A lot of people talk about him representing the next wave of Japanese fighters, and it's very exciting if that is the case. He will have a 2-inch height advantage and a 3-inch reach advantage, which is going to aid him in the striking exchanges. We saw him knock out Dustin Peg at bantamweight. He also stopped John De La Reyes in his last matchup, so he has some big-time power in a division where guys aren't lauded for that ability to put opponents away. When he fought De Los Rios, he landed an absolutely brutal body kick that crumpled his opponent to the mat, hurt him badly, and eventually finished him off with a nice counter left hand as De Los Rios came in and led to the ground and pound follow-up. He has good combinations. He changes his stance constantly, lots of movement, a variety of angles, head movement. He's a very tricky guy to deal with. I really like that. And if he continues to improve, I could see him being a threat to Demetrius Johnson. He covers distance exceptionally well, and he works from range, which is something I like to see as well. Mixes in his kicks and punches effectively, and nice striking exchange rate. 4.56 landed per minute to just 1.74 given up, which is pretty solid. For Gaudinot, he has some hard inside leg kicks. He only has 2 wins by knockout. He was stopped by Johnny Bedford when he fought at bantamweight, where he was clearly overmatched physically in that fight. He showed a good chin against John Lineker, where he was able to take some shots and survive and eventually get the victory. He was outlanded in that matchup, 121-94, and that fight didn't even go the distance. And at times he was letting Lineker tee off and simply trying to cover up, and that's an issue. He attempts to cover up when under attack instead of trying to move out. Elliott exploited that by just simply upping the work rate in those situations and scoring some massive points, even if he didn't knock him out, obviously. He did have trouble with the work rate and movement of Elliott as well, which is something Horiguchi should be able to implement here. Both guys are karate-based fighters, but I think it's more evident in the Japanese fighter's style, the way he stands, the way he moves. The key to Gaudinot's success could be his ground game, though. Horiguchi has a few defensive grappling issues. Peg had him in some trouble, but again, that was a bantamweight against a very long and lanky guy, something that Gaudinot is not. For Lewis, 2 wins by submission, including the John Lineker tap-out. It's actually 3 if you count the Phil Harris win, all by guillotine choke, so he likes to attack that neck. For Horiguchi, he needs to watch that neck. If he gets in closed up, Gaudinot will go for a submission hold. But for Gaudinot, he had trouble working off his back against Timothy Elliott, who was able to just keep, smashing him and outworking him. And Horiguchi has brutal ground and pound. Finished Peg, as I said, and De La Reyes from that position. He has just 1 win by submission. So the middle fight of the night takes place in the UFC's middleweight division. This number 15th ranked Brad Tavares, 12-4-0. Battles former Gaudinot, welterweight champion, and UFC middleweight find much contender. Wrestling, I don't think great Marquardt, currently the power and technique of Horiguchi wins 13 losses, especially if Gaudinot tries to weather the storm. These are 2 fighters at different points in their careers, but actually not really when you look at least where they're headed in the short term, long term, certainly different points. Tavares is very young. He's trying to climb the ranks. He's currently ranked 15th in the division. He's on a 2-fight losing skid. For Marquardt, he's a veteran fighter, 8 years older than his opponent. He's returning to middleweight. He's a former title challenger. He's currently unranked. He's coming off a win, ending a 3-fight winning streak. But just like Tavares, he's trying to gain some traction in the division and try and get some notoriety and rise up the ranks. Massive experience advantage for Marquardt. 48 total fights to just 15 for Brad Tavares. He's also fought 17 times in the UFC. Tavares fought 10, which is pretty significant considering he's only fought 15 overall. For Brad Tavares, he's coming off his first knockout loss of his career, which can be difficult and really change the perspective of a lot of guys if they do get when they do get KO'd that first time. They start getting concerned and making adjustments that maybe aren't the best for their fighting output. Physically, Tavares 1 inch taller. Guys have the identical reach. Big numbers to stand out. Marquardt, 3 losses by knockout. His last 2 UFC losses have come by knockout, plus a stoppage UFC 73 against Anderson Silva. So it leaves some big questions about his chin if Brad Tavares can land one flush. He's also 8-8 in fights that end in decision, and he's lost 4 of his last 5 fights that go the distance. For Brad Tavares, 2 losses that went the distance. 2 losses that he's currently the skid he's currently enduring. He went the distance with Yoel Romero. He's the only fighter to go the distance with Romero other than Rafael Feijiao, who stopped Romero at light heavyweight. So that's pretty impressive for Tavares, considering that Yoel Romero just absolutely blitzed and destroyed Tim Kennedy. His second fight, he was beating Tim Boach. He won that first round, was winning the second round until an untimely referee separation resulted in him getting clipped and eventually put down. For Marquardt, he can strike. He's a very talented and capable striker. We saw that in the Tyrone Woodley fight. We've seen flashes of that in other matchups. He throws a nice variety of strikes, but that chin is a major question mark, and he also tends to hesitate a little bit when he's under fire and opponents can keep him at range. He struggled with the striking game of Tarek Safadine, and the inability to switch things up when Safadine was targeting his leg over and over again and hurting him really brings into question his fight IQ. For Tavares, he has an improved striking game. He's training under Ray Saffo, which shows how talented this guy is. Good Muay Thai, very physical striker. He's made some big strides in his last number of fights, and it's really been quite a nice thing to watch him move up the ranks of late. I think he should look to employ leg kicks again, implement a similar game to what Tarek Safadine did, take away Nate's base, and put some doubt in his mind when he's landing those strikes. He also needs to be more active and keep Nate backing up, which is a question mark. I don't know if Tavares has that style in him. Nate should try to take this fight to the floor. He's a BJJ black belt with 16 wins by submission. He's exceptionally strong hips, good on top. We saw him submit James Tahuna, which was his first submission win in 13 fights going back to 2008, where he submitted Jeremy Horn at UFC 81. For Tahuna, in that matchup against Marquardt, he kept going for takedowns, and Marquardt showed those strong hips, reversed the position, was able to get on top, and eventually rolled into the armbar. And that's something that I think could come back to haunt Brad Tavares in this fight, because he tends to really try to muscle guys in the clinch, tie up, grind them into the wall. He's a good grappler, but he, against Marquardt, technically he's not there yet. I think he's going to put himself in some positions to be caught. He, submissions are at least out-grappled. He tends to tie up too much. I think it'll give Marquardt ample opportunity to control the grappling situations and attempt submissions. But I think Nate's going to land something big, and my prediction is Nate Marquardt to defeat Brad Tavares by knockout. Not submission, but knockout. In the co-main event of the evening, we switch gears and we head to the UFC's lightweight division for an absolutely massive matchup as the number 4 ranked Donald Cowboy Cerrone, 25-6-0 with 1 no contest, battles the undefeated number 8 ranked Myles Fury Jury, currently with 15 wins and not a single defeat on his professional record. Now, Jury recently fought Donald Cerrone's teammate Diego Sanchez, so that was, should give Cerrone some insight. But on the other side of things, Cerrone fought Jeremy Stevens, who's a friend and training partner of Myles Jury. So both guys have people they can go and talk to their opponent, about their opponent, get some first-hand information. So it kind of cancels each other out in that scenario. Winner could get a shot at a title in the future or a title eliminator matchup next if that does present itself. Jury currently is undefeated, as I said, 7 wins by knockout. He knocked out Takanori Gomi and Ramsey Nijim, the first being a little more impressive than the latter. Lots of lateral movement in his attack, moves away well, shuts down opponent's offense very effectively, throws a nice left jab, hard right hand, nice right hand that rocked Gomi and put him down. He ended that fight with some follow-up barrage. An absolutely solid kicking game, which he will bring into effect in this matchup. Nice counter right hand, which caught Diego Sanchez coming forward a couple of times, and we saw him also KO Ramsey in the gym with it. He uses footwork and movement to get. I think he'll use footwork and movement to get Donald Cerrone, telegraphing his attacks and really force him into a position he's not happy with. He mixes up his striking very well with his grappling as well. Punch, change levels for a takedown. He's a BJJ black belt training out of Alliance Training Center, which he's a pretty good grappler in that way. 5 submissions overall. We did see him land some nice takedowns against Diego Sanchez as he came forward, and Diego's a pretty good grappler in his own right, and we saw him absolutely bury Michael Johnson under his top position pressure for a 3-round decision. For Cerrone, absolutely nasty off his back, though, if Jury does try to take him down. 15 wins by submission, improving wrestling. He's hard to take down to start with, but not impossible. We have seen it. Rafael Dos Anjos grounded him in that matchup, and if Jury can maintain top control, it will take Cerrone out of his element if he can shut down those submissions and score him some serious points. For Cerrone, just 4 wins by knockout overall in his career, but he has significant power. Don't be fooled by that number. Usually what we see is a knockdown and a follow-up submission. He has that lethal Muay Thai attack, beautiful stepping knee, which he really likes to employ, and there could be it's a counter to a right hook if Jury just try to use it to slip that knee in and back him off. Kicks and knees, again, they're pretty much the biggest part of his arsenal. He really likes that front kick. We saw him hurt Jim Miller with several body kicks, eventually open up the head kick because it forced Miller to try and lower those hands to slough off anything that went to his midsection. Cerrone, he used a lot of low kicks to turn that Eddie Alvarez fight around, eventually hurt him with a low kick, and it really gave him an advantage when he took away Alvarez's base. But with Donald Cerrone, we have seen issues where he can lose striking matchups. If he's forced to back up continually, he will struggle. He was having trouble with the boxing of Eddie Alvarez early and against Nate Diaz for almost that entire matchup. And he tends to take too much damage. So something, if he he continues to walk forward and guys can hit him, he's looking to land a bigger shot. And if he can't find something big, it's going to really cost him. Body shot vulnerability we saw against Anthony Pettis. He did have that motorcycle accident a number of years ago. He's also open to a right hand, which he was dropped by Rafael dos Anjos with, and that's where Jury's counter right hand could certainly come into effect. If you look at some of his fights, he's had trouble in fights. In various fights, with one major difference. Against Dos Anjos and against Nate Diaz, he wasn't able to land something big to change the fight in his complexion as he was with Eddie Alvarez, where he started landing those low kicks. With Edson Barboza, where he caught him with that quick jab, and against Miller, where he landed a body kick as well. If he can't land those fight-changing kicks, he could be in trouble. Jury does an absolutely great job of limiting his opponent's damage and tends to work from the outside very effectively. The reach is about the same height advantage to Cerrone, so I think Jury should be able to implement a similar game plan. And again, if Cerrone gets hit too much and can't reply, that's not going to work well for him. I think Jury's going to limit his Cerrone's effectiveness with his movement, not trading and mixing, and will mix in his wrestling as well, and keep Cerrone, not nearly as effective because he can't land from the outside, can't land that fight-changing blow. This is a big step up for Myles Jury, but I think he's progressing nicely, and I have Myles Jury to eke out a very close decision against Donald Cerrone. So again, my prediction is Myles Jury to defeat Donald Cerrone by decision. We now move to the main event of the evening in the UFC's light heavyweight divisions. The title will be on the line. The champion, John Bones Jones, 20 wins and just a single loss, takes on the number 2 ranked Daniel D.C. Cormier, currently undefeated at 15-0. Now, taking a quick look, we have the UFC heavyweight champion against the Strikeforce heavyweight Grand Prix winner. We have the youngest champion in UFC history and the most successful light heavyweight champion with 7 title defenses, taking on vaunted Olympic wrestler and multi-time world and Pan Am medalist in Daniel Cormier. Massive emotional factor heading into this fight. I don't need to go into the details unless you've lived under a rock, and all you have to do is go to Google or any website and they will highlight it for you. This kind of reminds me a little bit of John Jones versus Rashad Evans, but amped up significantly. And we saw in that matchup where the emotion and hatred heading into it kind of prevented both guys from performing, as they did not want to make a mistake that would cost them the fight in that matchup. For Johnny Jones, 9-month layoff, leg injury. He's been very, very active of late, but he's had kind of a big chunk of time off, coming off a leg injury that forced him out of the last bout, only fighting one time in 2014. For Cormier, he's been on the shelf for 8 months. I think he had knee surgery. Please correct me if I'm wrong. That could be an issue, but I didn't come across anything that confirmed or denied that. Physically, Jones 5-inch reach advantage, 5-inch height advantage, and a massive 12-inch reach advantage, which is huge. But take into account here, Cormier has fought some monsters, especially when he competed at heavyweight. You look at Antonio Bigfoot Silva, at a 5-inch height advantage and an 8-inch reach advantage in that matchup. So he's dealt with some big men in the past. The big question is, can Daniel Cormier handle that reach disadvantage and take away one of Jones's biggest weapons? We saw him use his hand speed against Antonio Bigfoot Silva to try and deal with the reach. Probably won't be faster than John Jones. He could be close, but that wasn't an issue there. Where I think he'll try and get over that is getting inside and use his wrestling. Against Josh Barnett, another very big man, he uses takedowns. 4 of 7 takedowns, and that wrestling overcame the size and length disadvantage very effectively. For John Jones, he likes to use that long jab, constant hand out, pawing in his opponent's face, poking him in the eye several times, which is well documented. Also the kicks, especially to the knee and the oblique, to keep guys backing up and keep that distance. He does an excellent job of limiting his opponent's impact, landing just 1.92 strikes per minute. Despite facing top-level competition, keep that in mind. When he did fight Gus, he gave up 114 strikes. That's the fight he's been hit in the most. He landed 137 of his own, but it showed he is human. At range, Cormier could find it tough to have success. He will need to make up for it when he gets in close, though. Jones does come from an amateur wrestling background, 96% takedown defense. And so far, Alexander Gustafsson, the only man to take him down in his career. Evans tried 4 times and went 0 for 4 in that matchup. But Cormier is simply on another level of wrestling. He has looked dominant against very big heavyweights, against guys like Josh Barnett, who is a massive individual. But this, he hasn't faced a lot of big tests at light heavyweight. Averaged 2.17 takedowns at 48% so far in his UFC career. So not huge numbers, but very effective nonetheless. We did see him maul Dan Henderson, tossed a very good wrestler in Dan Henderson around, smothered him on the mat. Really liked that cross-side position where he was able to hold him down and do damage and eventually submit him from. Jones is very strong from the clinch. He busted up Glover Teixeira at close range, but he had trouble holding him down, and that leads me to believe if he can't hold Glover down, he might have trouble controlling Daniel Cormier. As I said, Gustafsson gave him a lot of trouble in the grappling department. Jones went 1 for 11 on takedowns and was taken down, as I said, 1 time. And it seemed to rattle him and he lost a little of his confidence when he couldn't gain that grappling advantage and didn't have that to rely on. Could Jones' height play against him in this matchup, as Cormier will be able to establish that lower base and score takedowns because he's able to elevate John Jones? where normally Jones, guys are a little bit taller, Jones can tie up with them. There's motivation for Jones is a big question. He's been champion for a long time. Is he not putting the work in? Are there issues there? Has he lost that desire to really push himself because he's been at the top for so long? For Cormier, he's still hungry. He's looking to gain recognition still. He hasn't climbed to the top of the ladder yet. His striking has showed continued improvement, but the ability to gain grappling control will be massive in this fight. He's making his striking will become better because he can out-grapple Jon Jones. He went 5 rounds with Josh Barnett, which was a good experience. He landed takedowns in the 5th round in that matchup. This is a big test for Jon Jones. He has faced some challenges in his career, but there are some questions about some of his opponents facing guys that are maybe a little bit over the hill, like Rampage Jackson, or some blown-up middleweights. I think Cormier's going to land some key takedowns. I think he's going to put some doubt in Jon Jones' head. I think we saw that Jones can be defeated, as was the case against Alexander Gustafsson, or at least close. And my prediction is Daniel Cormier to defeat Jon Jones by very close decision. Those are my 5 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC 182 event. Of course, I do predict 2 massive upsets. I'm sure I'll hear lots of comments about it, but please feel free to express yourself and disagree with me in an intelligent and appropriate manner, respectful to both myself and yourself. Don't make yourself look like an idiot online. I'm sure there'll be at least one person who does that. As always, head over to my website, check out all my preliminary predictions, check out the bet packs, vote in the polls which are posted, and as always, let's hope we get UFC's 2015 schedule started off on the right foot. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you in the not-too-distant future.